Well, we begin now with major news on these rising anti-democratic forces in America. From the voting rights crackdowns and assorted government plots to the big lie attacks on election results that can stoke actual insurrections. Now, we know the U.S. has faced many different types of crises before, but this era has been a perfect storm of right-wing demagogues, weaponized propaganda from the internet to the Fox News defamation we covered, and this is key, the perfect storm includes a high-powered, elite-driven effort to mainstream attacks on democracy and try to write them into our rules. And that part of the effort is not, let's be clear, criminal activity like January 6th. It's not something people are going to go to jail for. It is what at least lawyers and others call arguably legal attacks that are still designed to hijack democracy from within. And this is our top story right now tonight because this brings us to efforts to bend or break current laws and rules to try to foster more anti-democratic outcomes that would be technically legal if these people get their way. I'm talking about a world where politicians pick their voters instead of the other way around. And I want to be clear. There have been times where both parties have abused certain tactics, like distorting and gerrymandering districts. And if you believe in democracy, it's wrong, period, no matter who does it. At the same time, I want to tell you what's happening. The big push right now is a specifically radical Republican effort on the right. And it's been trying to get basically what they think are their allies, the Trump fans that are on the Supreme Court. He did get 3 justices on there, along with other Republican appointees to try to endorse an attack on voting, trying to give states the kind of unreviewable authority that those 2020 coup plotters wished they had, and then distort or even override the vote if it doesn't go their way, which in this case means if it doesn't go Republican. It is a legal effort that has started to draw major warnings.
A high-stakes case on voting laws.
States have the primary authority to establish election law.
It's kind of an arcane theory.
We're going to find out if, in fact, the Constitution tells us that state legislatures are the exclusive and ultimate arbiter of election rules.
Many analysts say the outcome could potentially, quote, damage American democracy.
And that's huge.
It is huge, and it can be damaging. So let's look at how this works specifically. Take North Carolina, which went about 50% for Trump in the last election. But the state's Republican politicians abused their powers over map drawing to try to hand their own party 71% of their delegation, you see there. That's, if you count, about 40% more voting power than they won from the voters. That is a huge difference. It's self-dealing. It's distortive. It's not democratic. Now, when you look at that example, that's one of many, but that example, that effort was so brazen, judges just threw out that attempted map. Then Republicans took that appeal to the Supreme Court to try to keep the map. And also along the way, they were trying to get the endorsement of an anti-democracy theory that might allow the kind of state-driven coups I mentioned that Trump wanted in 2020. So what's the Supreme Court going to do? Well, you're watching the news. I have the news for you. Today, the Supreme Court ruled against Republicans in North Carolina, dealing a blow to these MAGA allies and opposing that type of partisan gerrymander, plus what I mentioned, the efforts to try to supersize state coup powers through this fringe theory. So that is a big deal and a big loss for them. As for the court, Republican appointee Chief Justice Roberts wrote the 6-3 ruling, joined by 2 other Republican appointees. And this comes after Roberts, who has undercut MLK's Voting Rights Act in the past, led other recent rulings that draw at least a line to protect some basic voting rights, including in southern states with a long history of racist attacks on black and brown voting rights. So here we have a ruling that fortifies some voting rights, a basic standard, and adds another rebuke to the coup plotters like Trump lawyer John Eastman, who's actually facing other setbacks this week as California considers yanking his law license. So when I tell you tonight this is a big story out of the Supreme Court, that's because it's national news. If you hadn't heard about this case that much, well, it's one of those times where, believe me, if it went the other way, you'd be hearing about it for years because it would have rewired our democracy. And so this, for some people, seems like a victory. It definitely had a bipartisan coalition. For others, it's a warning. And for others still, it's a reminder of something we've talked about on this program and heard from our experts about, that the fight for democracy in America is not something that is over, that is complete, nor is America, if we define democracy as a place where we all get to vote, a very old democracy. At best, we're a young democracy. And we need coalitions of people who are willing to fight for everyone's rights, not just some people's rights, and not just go with the elections when they like the outcome.